we have an esteemed panel of experts. We'll deep dive into the significance of NIS2 Directive and of the Digital Operational Resilience Act, DORA. I welcome to the stage Moderator Anne Leslie, Cloud Risk Controls Leader EMEA, Financial Services IBM. Cathie-Rosalie Joly, Partner, Bird & Bird Law Firm. Martina, Dvar, European Central Bank Advisor. And Tasheva, co-founder of CYEN and working group member at ENISA.
So thank you. Better? Yes, there we go. So thank you to you all for attending. I'm delighted to have a diverse, well, we're all women, but in skill set, a diverse panel of experts. So to my right here, we have Tasheva. She's co-founder of a specialist consulting company based in Brussels called CYEN, looking very deeply at governance, risk, and compliance. And she's also a member of one of the ENISA working groups. To my left, I have Cathie-Rosalie Joly, who partner at Bird & Bird, and Martina, Dvar, who is a special advisor to the European Central Bank. Now, the reason I was really keen to have these skill sets is because I particularly look at cloud technology and the aspects of risk, etc., in the financial services sector. Wasn't me. And what I've noticed in the work that I'm doing is that we really do need cross-functional teams. We need multidisciplinary skill sets because no single domain has all of the answers on these topics. So looking specifically at DORA and NIS, I'd like to start with you, Eva. Can you just level set with us about the main provisions in terms of content? What are the kind of the banner items, big ticket items that firms who are in scope for one or both of these should be looking at?
Yes, indeed. Thank you for having me, first of all, and nice to meet you all. So what is the good news about DORA and NIS2 is that in a way they're very similar in the strategy. So it makes much sense for us as cybersecurity professionals to look at the risk, where the risk lies, and how do we as organizations manage the cybersecurity risk for ourselves. So the focus very much is on the risk management. How do companies organize and operate their risk management frameworks for cybersecurity? Very similar also in the elements of supply chain security. Probably this is great benefit for Europe, that for once we would have regulations which are very touching upon different sectors, but also setting minimum standards for cybersecurity. So when you are a supplier to one company which is in the scope of DORA, that means or of NIS2, that means that even if you're not directly scoped, you still have some cybersecurity awareness, provisions, and contractual obligations towards your clients. So with this, the benefit for Europe is that we would be looking at improved cybersecurity. In theory, we should also have easier supply chain management, knowing that all of us, we have to comply with the same rules, so there's a little bit more trust. I'm in compliance, so I don't like to trust people, I like to control, but at least you know what are the minimum regulations for everyone that you deal with. And another similarity, very important, is the incident notification. So as you could imagine, we all hear in the news cybersecurity attacks every day. Regulators figured that they don't want to hear from the news. They want to know when something major is happening in their consistencies. And they also want to make sure that if there's a cross-border implications, we also collaborate in a way that information is shared and everyone is prepared to respond to the threat. So this is what I usually advise, is to go to the risk management approach, be careful, but also check your supply chain security risks, and then you also have to this very particular moment of incident notification, which really needs to be mastered because it's the easiest way to get a fine, and this is not what we want. This is not what the objective of the regulations.
So for sure. Cathie, I'm going to turn to you next. So NIS2 and DORA are related but different. Could you tell us a little bit more about how they fit one in relation to the other? And specifically, if there are any things that might be ambivalent, ambiguous, challenging in terms of implementation, are there things that firms need to be aware of?
Yes, sure. You're right. NIS2 is a broader scope. It is applicable to all aspects of the cybersecurity, and DORA is specific to resilience in financial sector, which is one of the difference. The other one is the fact that the NIS directive is a directive, so it needs to be implemented in each countries, and all authorities will have some room to adapt to the specific situation of their country. DORA regulation is a regulation that will enter into force in all countries in the same way. Also, we realize that since several years, regulation is more complicated because they also include technical requirements. A lot of RTS has been published, so it is complicated to understand and have a global overview of all the regulation, and also to clarify the interconnection between the different regulations. Today we talk about NIS2 and DORA, but we also have to keep in mind GDPR, AI Act that we just discussed. So it is quite complicated because it takes time to analyze each regulation, interpret also sometimes because we have general principle, but we do not know in details how we have to implement it. Also because there is a reference to a proportionality approach. So what is a proportionality approach? I have to understand my own risk. There is no standard requirement, there is a global requirement, and then I have to adapt to my specific situation. It is also necessary to understand the scope and the applicability to identify the critical function, the critical providers, and adapt the requirement to each of them. Cross-border coordination, it's very difficult also. As I said, regarding NIS2, we will have many different regulations in Europe. So how, as a company, I am able to address all of these specific regulations? So it is necessary to understand, qualify, have a multi-country analysis to be able to adapt. Of course, review of the contractual agreement, because there is a lot to negotiate, and sometimes it's quite complicated to explain that we do not need to have only the principle in the contractual agreement. We have to describe it in more details in an operational way. And this is a crucial point, because usually they will say, oh, I'm an attorney, I'm legal, so I will focus on principle and legal requirement. And when I say, but it's not enough, I have to understand how you will implement such requirements. So I need to have more details, technical details. I need also operational organization information, how you will exchange with your providers. And when I say that, usually they say to me, no, it's operational, it's not legal. We will discuss it during our meeting between with the different providers. It's not necessary to have such details in the agreement. It's absolutely necessary to have such details in the negotiation to be clear on what I have to do, how I will control, how I will exchange, what are the responsibilities of the different parties. And also, of course, the sponsorship of the board and the commitment of the board. At the introduction, you said that it's a business risk. It's right, it's a business risk. So we need to be able to explain to the board of directors why it is necessary to comply. It's not only because there are fines, it's also because as a financial institution, for example, I may lose my license or have a suspension. It is also for competition, because I have to be able to prove and to help my financial institution saying, I am already compliant, I have analyzed all the regulation, we can work together. And then you create trust, which is key in this area.
So that's music to my ears that a lawyer is saying this, because I spend my days trying to work with clients and with our internal teams to actually operationalize regulation. And that point around what's in the contract, oh, not much, is a real problem. So it's a lot of work in that stage where everybody is in a hurry, everybody just wants to wrap the agreement up, get the signing, get the signature, etc. But downstream, doing that work up front and knowing who's going to do what and knowing where the line sits in terms of who's sharing what responsibility, it's just so comfortable to have it. And I think so few firms do have it, which is where I'd like to bring you in, Martina, because so NIS2 and DORA are arriving in a context, right? NIS1 is already in place, but it's not like there's not already an existing body of regulation, okay? So there's prudential regulation and a supervision mechanism that's in place. Can you tell us a bit more about how the ECB is looking at this and the focus, to the extent you're able to? Tell us a little bit about the expectations.
Sure. Can you hear me? Yes. Okay. Yeah, well, for sharing in a very brief context, I would just like to tell you a couple of thoughts, which are my thoughts, just to make a disclosure, not the ECB stance, about this proportionate implementation of this hygiene. So when we talk about hygiene, because this is a hygiene kind of, let's say, regulation, then there is a reason why there is such a regulation. As European Union was not made for us to trade freely and to move, around the countries, but to preserve peace. Also, this regulations comes from the very notion that financial industry is heavily kind of leveraging on the state, support, especially in banking, on deposit insurance. That's why we build this strength to capture this kind of, let's say, feature of developing of the industry. Therefore, the regulation is completely legitimate. Now, when we talk about hygiene, we talk about a process. And we were listening to that process kind of context in the opening remarks. So process to assess, to implement in a proportionate way is something which is ongoing and constantly changing. So you cannot brush your teeth once a year and say, that, check. You're brushing your teeth every day, a couple of times a day, right? So the process is what we are having to assess. So how do you actually implement that in the organizations? Sometimes they say, especially for the public health, it is not like important to have a regulation in place. It is very necessary to explain the regulation. So if you tell all the people you should wash your hands, you should brush your teeth, okay, they will obey, but you have to explain why, right? Because sometimes organizations would like to aim to have and brag about having AI, having IT technology behind, but having absolutely no notion how to manage security. The board members, they are focused on their business kind of things, and they are not aiming at this, let's say, implementation. So this DORA Act actually comes from the very notion that supervisors realize that we are free in the marriage. There is a bank, there is a supervisor, and there is outsourcer. And the outsourcer came into our marriage where we kind of managed to have a reach out to the IT systems of the banks, and now those systems took a border somewhere else, right? So the banking is happening somewhere else in some other machine. So we have to make sure that everything is safe. Going back to hygiene, why? Because we insure deposits. So I don't see like a problem for the outsourcer or technology firm to understand that as they came into this marriage free willingly, that they accept this regulation as the regular, let's say, takeaway from that. Nobody is trying to pacer anyone, so you don't have to service banking industry with IT, but if you do, please bear in mind that there is a notion of hygiene and implementation needed as such. So how we do it in a proportionate way? It is a complicated thing, right? And it is a complicated thing because every institution is let's say, organism of its own. Unlike any financial risks, credit risk, you don't pay your loan. Trading risk, market risk, you trade bad, you lose your money. Operational risk is really something which is inherent to each of the organizations, and the banks started to also be competing institutions in technology. So they're not only producing products, they are producing technology to support those products. So what is the easiest way to do it? So going back to the checklists, which is usually the very, very problem you have, either on supervisory side or let's say the banking side. Where is this checklist? Once I do the checklist, I'm done, right? Once I brush my teeth, I'm done. This is not the good approach, right? The good approach is understand what DORA means and operational resilience mean. And that means that your critical services can be delivered in the times of stress. So, first step is to identify which are the critical services. In the organism, right, we use a lot of, let's say, analogies for explaining this. We have a head, we have a stomach, we have our lungs. These are critical for me to be able to work. In the times of the stress, let's say that I'm freezing, my body was first, dissolved from my legs, from my hands, from my fingers, because they are not critical. So the very, very simple information and, let's say, approach to apply DORA is just be aware of what is your critical. Now, if critical is assigned to, let's say, organs, right, and you don't think about the processes, the blood system, the nerves and everything else, which makes the organs move and breathe, so the critical services being able to work, and you're not aware of this infrastructure behind it, or it is so complicated that when disease comes, you just don't know how to resolve it, then this is an issue. But this is not an issue of the regulator or supervisor. It's like essential for each organization to be aware of. Now, having a business people, let's say, embracing technology that they use for delivering their services, including in banking, that's very, very difficult. I think that there is a Nobel Prize to be offered to someone to explain to a business person, whilst you are making millions because you don't protect your data, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, we are losing millions as well, right? So this kind of nice connection should be made. So proportional implementation of hygiene remains of having processes in place, implementing it in a way that people understand that this is a culture, and what are you protecting? You're protecting critical. You're not wasting time on something which is sporadic. And please don't use the check boxes, because also you don't like to have supervisors to check the boxes as well. So bear in mind that banks are paying for supervision, so make a use of that consultancy. And it's not free, right?
Thanks, Martina. And it sounds really obvious that everybody in a bank would know easily what's critical. My anecdotal observation is not so much, or not everybody does, not everybody agrees. And I know you do a lot of work accompanying firms in uplifting and evaluating their cybersecurity, their governance, their compliance. How are you working with them in terms of helping them think through what should we be prioritizing, in what order? How do you work with your clients when you're trying to figure out the methods you use, the mental models you use, to get them to be able to identify this is what matters most. The other things are important, but this is what we're going to focus on.
Yes, indeed. So again, the regulation is there because there was an issue. There was an issue of disregarding cybersecurity as a value, eventually as the infrastructure carrying business activities. But risk management approach is very important in that sense, because it invites companies to consider what is important for them. And indeed, this is probably one of the benefits of the DORA, again, looking at critical services and critical activities. This is why you touched upon, and I would reiterate again, it's very important to engage the management, the high-level top management, because they are eventually the decision makers. What activities are my mission, my critical mission activities? How do I want to be seen across the globe when it comes to reliability, when it comes to security, when it comes to responsibility? And only then, once you know what is your business critical activities, once you know what are the elements you want to preserve, you might go and see the regulation, how, what it's prescribing as minimum requirements. But for me, it's very important to pass the message that regulations for cybersecurity are coming in box. There is DORA, today we're discussing, a NIS2, but we would have the Cyber Resilience Act, we have medical devices regulation with the security elements, machinery directive. So with the banking and in general the industry going more horizontal, you would fall under many different requirements targeting specific element of your criticality, of your critical businesses. And you would probably work globally. And we see Bank of England have their regulatory framework. In Europe, we have regulatory framework. US has completely different regulation. Everyone has their own regulatory framework. So what you want to avoid is to run behind different stakeholders, different clients, different suppliers, different regulators. You want to say, okay, let's go back to basics. This is me, this is my service, this is what matters to me, and this is how I would integrate all these different elements in my strategy. So we are not driven by the regulation, because then I promise you would be running in all kind of directions, and you would be doing controls every month with a different element, different wording, with a little different scope. You would be spending millions on controlling without any benefit for security. So let's go back to basics. What is important for our business? How security intervenes, and how to design a security strategy which obviously complies with the different regulations, but is not there for it, is integrated.
Got it. So it's starting with the business. Starting with the business and being very outcome focused from what it sounds. And again, just from my own experience in terms of the implementation work that I've been doing lately, what I've been seeing firms struggle with is trying to figure out how to balance different buckets of risk. So in terms of, Martina, you mentioned GDPR. We have data protection authorities who look after that. We've got banking supervisors who look after primarily financial stability and, the prudential soundness of institutions. And what I'm seeing firms struggle with is satisfying all of their masters and knowing where it's okay to trade off and say, my risk appetite will allow me to take more risk here, less risk here. And while the thought process might be sound, what they're actually missing is the data that will make people feel safe, that they've actually got a model behind it that is very robust. And I think that's probably where methodology like FAIR comes in, because there is a big aspect of bringing subjective SME expertise to a particular topic, but then trying to make people feel safe that they've made a decision that they can stand behind. And to your point around board level buy-in, C-suite buy-in, people do need to feel comfortable in an environment which is designed to make everybody feel very uncomfortable. But Cathie, if I come back to you, so rightly or wrongly, a lot of people look to the legal function as sort of like the equalizer. We're going to do what legal tells us. Are you seeing a change in dynamic maybe in terms of how different functions in organizations are collaborating? Is that changing? Are they collaborating more and differently?
It's changing, and we have more collaboration, which is crucial. as an attorney, I'm specialized in IT regulation and banking regulation, which is now known as fintech regulation, since 20 years now. So, since 20 years, I said it is necessary to have all the people around the table when we are talking about risk assessment. We need to understand. And regarding collaboration, for example, in my approach, I recommend to implement a legal risk assessment of the different providers. As it was said, it is necessary to understand what is crucial for the entity, what are the functions that I have to secure first, because I do not have enough money to apply the same rules to whole aspect and whole function, and at the end it will not work because I wasn't able to identify what is crucial or not. This is the key regarding the approach. And also to be sure that with the IT guys, the legal guys, the business guys, we will be able to understand together what is crucial, because maybe one aspect that is crucial on IT or legal is not crucial on all aspects, and I have to identify what is a common critical function, what is a common critical providers, and also to be sure that we will taking in account all criteria. The criticality of the providers, for example, or a function is not only related to the importance of such providers. It is more to understand how it works, how it is integrating with other aspects, and then what will be the consequences if it doesn't work. Maybe it's not the big deal, it's not the main providers I have, but it is the more crucial. And I have to be able to understand that. So I require usually to have interdepartmental meetings to be sure that all the people are able to exchange together. Also define a glossary of terms, because we have all our own jargon, legal jargon, technical jargon, and sometimes we just misunderstand together because we use the same word, but it doesn't refer to the same reality. So it is necessary to define that. And of course, be proactive. I do not need to wait for an issue. I have to understand, to be prepared, to simulate incident, to prepare draft notification, to have identified the key people regarding cybersecurity. So, and of course, the update, legal update, technical updates are crucial. Exchange with my peers, be part of association, exchange with regulator. They whole request, and it is possible to exchange with them. There are several working groups with the ANSI in France, with the ACPR, with the IMF. So it is possible to have such kind of exchange. And it is also crucial to be able to justify that I apply such requirement, I secure such specific agreement, I identify such critical providers in my register, because if you are not able to explain why, you are not secure.
We're going to be running out of time, and I'd love just to wrap up with you, Martina. So we've heard about the importance of prioritizing. We've heard about the need for clarity, the need for collaboration, the need for multifunctional, cross-disciplinary teams. Going forward, it's sounding to me like the UCB has a very clear focus on the questions you're going to be asking and a certain level of insistence that you're not going to walk away unless you like the answer. What are you hopeful that the financial sector will build in terms of capability? Where are you hoping to see improvement?
Yeah, for sure this cooperation, so understanding how technology works within the organization, but also just to manage the expectations from the tech colleagues who are maybe entering this, let's say, zone of regulatory kind of interactions. So the regulators are, just to use maybe the mathematical terms or whatever, they are pulsing from 0 to minus, right? The feedback that you people get, when we're supervised, will never go above 0. So nobody will tell you, wow, this cyber hygiene and this, oh, that's perfect. That's, plus, I'll give you 10 points for that. No, you'll always get 0. No, like no feedback, which means that is fine. What is not fine will go into the minus. The only positive feedback that the institution will get once they remediate something which was a drawback, right? Oh, thank you for implementing our supervisory measure, full stop. That's it. So if everyone is like, say, managing their expectations, saying that the supervisors will go from 0 to minus, never to plus, never seeking for supervisor, which are not that numerous, not that knowledgeable about your business model, but have a very noble function of preserving the stability of financial institutions and deposits that are there. So please bear in mind that there is need to give us assurance of what you're doing. And this is very easy. You just go through the, let's say, disproportional implementation of hygiene. I'm trying to explain. You know what is critical. You explain to all of the people in the organization, this is really critical. We cannot survive as an organization without that. And you keep on having this process ongoing and going constantly, depending on the circumstances. But the feedback and the implementation from our side will always be in, let's say, seeing the flaws in the picture that the banks are depicting for themselves. So if there is a very, very, let's say, business notion to go cloud computing, I don't know, different things of, let's say, managing your infrastructure, that's fine, yeah. Just assure us how operational resilience is maintained. And this is really like a legitimate question. And there should be plan B. And if there is no plan B, please don't be offended if somebody comes and say, guys, you don't have a plan B. You're completely stuck with this process. You don't have a bypass to deliver the service. So the managing of these expectations is really, I think, easy as long as the institution ensures among their own, let's say, members how to do it. It's easy to also give assurance to the supervisor. Of course, we will have activities. There is stress tests coming. There are different activities coming. But believe me, in our organization also the key is a training. Being aware and explain to all of the people what this regulation stands for and how is the best way to implement it. And it's very difficult to implement this kind of operation risk regulations because, as I said, each of the organizations is an organism of its own. Like we all are different, let's say, organisms here. We are very different how and when we are brushing our teeth and how we are dealing with it. So this type of hygiene should be something inherent to the organization. And that's why check boxes do not help.
So nobody go anywhere near check boxes, please. So I just want to say thank you to all of my three panelists for joining. It's sounding to me that there's a lot of work ahead of everybody. There are a lot of crucial conversations that need to be had, but it is accessible. And I would imagine we might be back next year talking about the same thing to see how much progress has been made. But please give a round of applause to my panelists.